So today I want to talk a little bit about how to change a string on a violin. Probably up until this point, you've had the benefit of a nice violin shop or your teacher or somebody to do this for you, but times are changing right now. So if you need to take a string off or put a string on, we're going to start by taking a string off because my violin is fully strung right now. So when I'm going to do this, generally I will hold the violin between my knees so that I have two hands free to do whatever I need to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and take off my A string. So right now I'm holding onto my A string. I'm going to go up to the peg and I'm going to turn it towards myself like this. That is how you loosen the peg. There. So now it doesn't take very much. You're probably only going to have to turn like a quarter to a half of a turn before the peg will come loose all by itself. Now if you look, this is very loose and shaky and wobbly. It can turn really easily. This is not how that peg is going to be the majority of the time. Most of the time it's stuck in there pretty good, which it needs to be because it holds the string in place. So, all right, so I've got it between my knees and now I'm going to pull the string out. There, so now I've got the end of the string up here. Now the string is connected on the other side to the tail piece. So if I want to put a string in, the first thing I'm going to do, if you see, this is a little notched place right there. That's connected to the fine tuner. I'm going to go ahead and stick, there's a little ball. If you see a little metal ball, that's what anchors it in place. So I'm going to put that little metal ball into the slot and now it's being held. I can pull on it and it's not going to go anywhere. Now the next thing I have to do is attach it to the peg again. Now let me show you what the peg looks like up close if I take it out. So here's the peg. Now you'll see that there's some dull parts here on the peg and some shiny parts. Now the shiny parts are where it's been rubbing up against the sides of the peg box here and it's just kind of worn it down. Now if your peg has been really hard to tune or to turn, it's gotten really stuck in there, you want to get yourself some peg dope. I will demonstrate. Here's my peg dope right here. So I'm going to take the peg dope and take off the lid. It looks a little bit like a chocolate chapstick or something. And I'm going to put a little bit of the peg dope right there on the shiny parts. You can see there's a little bit of brown residue. That's the peg dope. That's the shiny stuff. And now if I put it back into the peg box and kind of work it in there, now it's been spread out over that shiny worn down place and it should turn a little bit more easily now. Now, the peg also has a tiny little hole. You should see a little bit of light going through that. Now when you put it into the peg hole in your peg box, you're going to be looking into the peg box at that hole because that's where you're going to put the string. Now I recommend when you do this, you're going to put your string through there, maybe 1/4 of an inch. You only want just a teensy tiny bit of it sticking out when you put it in there. You don't want lots and lots of extra string sticking through there. Otherwise, it just gets in the way of the other pegs in the peg box. All right, so now I am going to turn around here so that you can watch me doing this. Oop, there went my little ball out of the fine tuner. So let me stick it back in there. There. Now, the reason I always put this down between my knees is because you need to kind of maintain tightness on that string at all times. Otherwise, it's going to come loose from either the peg or the fine tuner spot. So now I'm going to put the peg back into the peg box, into the hole, make sure that it goes through both sides. And now I'm looking in there, I'm looking for that little hole I showed you. And I'm going to thread the string into that hole and get it in there about that 1/4 of an inch I was telling you about. It's being stubborn. I've done this about 1,000,000 times and it's still, every time, it's a little bit of a coordination game. So don't worry if it feels a little funny. Think about threading your sewing machine for the first time if you sew. It takes practice. Okay, so now I've got it in there. I'm trying not to pull it with this way because if I do, it'll come right out of that hole in the peg. But I do have to kind of be pulling up so that it will stay stuck in the tuner. So now I'm going to turn my peg. I'm not going to turn it and push on it yet because I don't want it to get stuck in there. There went my string. It popped right out of the hole. It's being stubborn. Get in there. There we go. Okay. There. I can see a little bit more of it sticking out this time than I had it the first time. All right, so now it's stuck in there pretty good. And I have the peg pushed in just the tiniest bit, not enough that it's going to make it hard to turn. And of course, I let go of the tension on this, so it came out of the fine tuner again. Oops. So there I go. I got it stuck in there again. Okay, now we've got tension from here up at the peg, and we've got tension from down here at the tuner. So now I'm holding it out here. I have to look for two little grooves that the string has to fit into. The first groove here is at the top of the fingerboard on the nut. You can see that little line there, that's where the string fits in. The nut keeps the string from being straight down onto the fingerboard at all times. Now the other little groove you're looking for is in the bridge. And there it is. There's a groove for each one of the strings to sit in so that they're not just flopping around on the bridge. All right, so now I'm going to start tightening the peg. I'm going to turn it away from myself. And I'm going to keep turning it. It's going to get tighter and tighter. Here I go. Now you see I'm still maintaining tension on that string with my first finger and my thumb. You can use whatever fingers you're comfortable with. And now I'm going to ease that string into the groove on the nut. And I'm going to check now. I've got it into that little groove on the bridge. So now I'm going to start tightening it a little bit more. Pretty soon I'm going to have to take my finger and thumb out of there. It's going to get tight enough to lay flush. There we go. Okay, so now it's into this groove. It's around the peg. It's into this groove, and it's into the tuner. But it's not in tune yet. So I've got to turn that peg, and I'm going to push this time so that when I let go, it's going to stay stuck. Not even close to A. And you can see I'm turning it a little bit more than I would if I were tuning. It has to go a lot more to get from a completely loose string to a tuned string. That still sounds like something on the D string. That sounds kind of like an A flat. We're almost there. I think I got it. Now, here's when our good old friend, the tuner, comes in handy. Now, you may be really, really good at tuning by ear, and if you are, more power to you. And that's one less little piece of equipment that you have to buy, or online tuning that you have to do. Oh, sorry, it's not set on A right now. There you go. There. Okay, so it says, well, you're in the region of A, but you're not really very close. So I'm going to turn that away from myself to make it tighter. And it said, too much, too much, too much. So I'm going to go back away from myself. Toward myself. Just a little bit. Okay, so now it's telling me you're much closer. Why don't you try using the tuners now? So I'm going to, it says right now, too high. So I'm going to go lower, which means I need to turn my fine tuner counterclockwise like this. Now I'm just demonstrating. I'm not actually turning it. If I have it this much too high, I only need to do a small turn like that. Oh, and even that they said maybe a little too much. So I went tiny bit clockwise. Almost there. Yeah, okay, it's happy with that. Now, again, as a reminder, to make the pegs tighter, while you're getting this string onto the violin, you're turning away from yourself. Away from yourself tightens the string. Tighter equals higher. Towards yourself, you're loosening the string. So if you need to take it off, you're going to bring it towards yourself. And then if you're going to use your tuners to be tuning to the right, clockwise, that's higher. You're screwing in the screw. Every time you screw it in and make it tighter, the string gets tighter. When the string gets tighter, the sound goes higher. When you unscrew, like lefty-loosey, the string gets less tension on it. It gets a little bit looser, and then it gets lower. So if your string is sharp, too high, you need to go counterclockwise, lefty-loosey. Or if it's really sharp, you need to use the peg and come towards yourself. If it's too low, you've got to go clockwise, right or tighter. And if you're trying to do it at the peg, if it's really bad, you got to go away from yourself. So now you may notice a second ago, that tuner was telling me, A-okay, we're in the green, we're awesome. Now, when you tune a string, you may get it in tune, and then 5 minutes later, it's going to be out of tune again, because the strings need to have like a few days of good tension before they stop and are finished stretching out. New strings take a while to stretch out. So while I am waiting for my strings to stretch out, if you're changing your strings, and you don't want to have to tune them every 5 minutes, what I recommend, tune them in the evening before you're about to go to bed, and tune them too high on purpose. I'm going to use my peg here. Good. Now that's telling me way too high. That's not an A. That's closer to a B flat. And I say, great. If I leave it there a little too high all night and then tune it in the morning, it's probably going to have stretched out to get closer to an A. You can do that for all of the strings except maybe E. I wouldn't do it so much for E. Like this, I put it almost like a half step too high. E, again, much more delicate. You're going to have to be more careful with it. So if you don't want to have to be tuning your strings every 5 minutes when you put new strings on, wait to put those strings on until you're finished with your practice and you're not going to play the violin again for like 12 hours. And then tune them all too high, a little bit too high. And then the next day when you get the violin out, it should be much, much more stretched out. And you may have to tune it once or twice after that. And it should take a lot of the stretch time out.